Hi, welcome to our video illustrating the Xguard horizontal laser. In this video we're going to be showing you how to do the installation of the Xguard laser system and also how to configure the Xguard system correctly. The Xguard is designed to provide safety in a non-contact solution for pedestrians, bicycles, motorbike, cars, all the things that generally loops in the ground won't be able to detect all the time. The Xguard can also be used to provide an activating trigger. So as cars or trucks come to approach it, they'll provide the trigger and the unit will go up. It can be fitted to a whole range of our different barriers. It can be used on the magnetic range as demonstrated here, and it can also be used with our FAAC B680, the 620 or the 640 and even the B614. They'll all be able to be integrated with the Xguard system. And part of the benefit of the Xguard system is it removes a lot of additional costs, such as the cutting of the presence loops underneath the beams and the cutting of loops for activation, which are forward of. Those can be, obviously, they're quite noisy, they're very dirty, in ways that require a lot of cleanup, and they have an additional cost. The Xguard is much simpler to fit, as you essentially just have a small conduit leading from the post, which is just in front of the beam, to the barrier housing. Now, when you get your Xguard horizontal laser, we recommend the use of the Xguard housing post assembly system. So you get these two components. We do recommend you use this. It's just so that this way you'll be able to mount the Xguard off to one side of the barrier, so you're definitely covering either side of the beam. If you mount it directly off the barrier, you're only generally catching underneath the beam, so you're not getting the full, essentially the full safety part of it. So we do recommend the use of the post and the housing on it. Now, we do recommend, it is written in the instructions that you receive, that the Xguard itself is mounted 40 centimeters from the road level itself, which means you'll need to cut this down on here. Now, the Xguard housing comes pre-assembled, as you can see. Obviously, undo the 4 screws at the bottom, which you're going to be using afterwards. The 2 housing parts will come apart. Now you have these 2 screws. Once you remove these 2, these are the ones that are going to basically secure the Xguard to the top of this housing. Obviously, you can see that this plate, once this has already been cut down, this will normally be further up, so around this size. And you'd have a hole at the front, and you'd have a hole at the back to match the holes are already pre-cut and pre-threaded on the actual bracket itself. So then you have your bracket that's going to go sit inside here. Obviously you can see it's already got the 4 holes pre-drilled on the top. Now what you need to do is make sure that you align either that Allen head socket or this Allen head socket to be for the middle, depending on whether you're looking to the right or to the left. It just depends on your orientation. So on here, the Allen head socket is panning at the front, which more or less lines up with the holes that are inside. Once you've cut your post accordingly, you'll be left with this. Obviously on this one, I've already pulled the cable through and the bracket's already attached, and it's already secured down by 1 screw. Now it should be that obviously the cars are going to be coming in this direction. Also there's the front of the barrier, so the cars will be going across it. The Xguard should be forward of the face of the barrier, so that the laser can go besides it, and should be also beyond the arc of the beam. So if the beam would be coming down here, the beam would be on this route, so the Xguard needs to be in forward of the beam. Ideally you want to get at least half a meter or so. So it should be, an ideal condition should be approximately about here, so that the edge of the beam is fully under cover. So if anyone walks into the area, it will be picked up straight away much earlier. That's also the reason why we don't recommend mounting directly off the barrier unless you absolutely have to, in which case only the edge of the beam would ever be covered. We have the angle adjustments. There's one here. This one is going to be controlling up, down on here. And we have the other one is over here on this side. That one will be controlling this angle adjustment instead. So if the road is falling that direction, we can mount it this way. If the rotor is going in this direction, we also want to tilt to the opposite side. To generate a tilt on the opposite side, we obviously have to rotate this by 90 degrees so that this socket is going off to this side, and the one that's on this side at the moment comes out to the front. So this one will now be doing up, down, and this one will be doing the angle adjustment. The other thing as well is when you're mounting this to the ground, it is recommended you only use one securing screw to start with. This is so that you can get the adjustment that way. So it points in the right direction. If you imagine if this was fitted over here, but there's only a small amount of adjustment in the actual Xguard itself. So you need to make sure that this is mounted correctly, so it's pointing the right way first, as much as possible. Once you've actually got your correct alignment, then you can fit the other remaining three bolts down into the ground. Now, the Xguard on the underside has a little lid that comes over. You've got the plug. It can only go in one of the points inside here. Plug it in. Get the cable around to one side. And make sure that you fit this little cover over the top. It's a bit of a tight squeeze, but it has to be so to provide you the IP65 rating that's on the unit. Now, when you have your Xguard plugged in, there are 3 arrows on the Xguard itself. These mount essentially the 3 different entry points that they can go in. You always use this one as your primary because this is the one where the center of the field is at. What you want to do is essentially, there are basically 3 entry points. There's one over this Allen head socket, there's one over a matching arrow underneath here, and there's one over the other Allen head socket. What you need to do is basically put this in. You can see the little notches. It should fit and rotate to secure. Once it's rotated around, it'll basically be locked in. At the end of the installation, you'll be using these 2 Phillips screws to secure the Xguard, so it prevents the rotation, accidental rotation by anyone cleaning it or doing anything to it. So this is what you will see when you first connect one of them up and it's already powered up. You just simply have 2 red lights, a little flashing yellow light, and a blue light on there. Now, this Xguard has already been plugged in. So you can see a bit closer. This is the cable that plugs into the Xguard. This is the other side. You may need to obviously cut this down to suit. But in there, you're having all the colors. Now, all of these colors on here match up to the colors in the wiring diagram. Now, the green and the brown are the power supply. We do recommend the use of a standalone power supply, 24 volt DC or 12 volt AC, to power the Xguard, mainly to provide a different power source other than the barrier. The white and yellow are the opening relay. Essentially, they will provide a trigger to the barrier. The pink and the violet, they are the safety field. They're normally giving you a normally closed circuit. The red and the blue are important. They are your test circuit. In order to be a category 2 system or a performance level C, they need to be connected to their respective circuits inside the barrier. In this case, red being the positive, blue being the negative. It does switching on both. The white red and the white blue are not used, so please just disregard them. Now that we've connected the Xguard and have wired it up to our barrier, the next step is the field positioning. The other key component you require when programming an Xguard is a remote control. It'll look like this. You may also have the original remote control that looks like this instead. Here is a new one for comparison. The new one is a bit smaller and has additional colored buttons at the bottom. And you have the labeling A, B, C, D on the right hand side. The original one doesn't have that, the colored buttons or the actual numbers, but they will still function. It will still do the same job as the brand new remote control. Now, so you first need to press the unlock button. Once the unlock button has been pressed, you will see that the light will start to blink. Once the light is blinking, you need to press the magic wand symbol twice. The red light will still remain blinking, and you're going to have 3 red lasers will now be visible. Now, please ensure you do not look into the lasers at this point. These are now a class 3 laser instead. Now that the Xguard lasers are in the correct orientation, we now need to adjust the angles. So as you can see, we obviously have the 2 adjustment points. There's one here at the front, which controls a up and down of the Xguard. And there's another one here, which is now controlling a tilt angle. Obviously, as you can see here, there's a slight difference between the height here and the height of the laser over there. So I now need to go back and adjust the angle here to obviously tilt this side up to bring that beam down. So now the Xguard laser is now at the same height as the Xguard is itself. And it should do that as well for the beam that is going across as well. This is where this one will now do that part instead. Our Xguard laser is mounted on my left side, and I'm in the approach to the barrier. So this is a left hand mount. If the Xguard was mounted to my right hand side, then it would be a right hand side mounted Xguard instead. Now it is recommended that you use the mounting, as it says, with reference. This is where the reflective sticker comes into use. Now what you need to do is put this sticker somewhere where the laser is pointing at, that is within 10 meters of the barrier and is a fixed position so that it does not move. And this will tell the Xguard where its basically fixed position is. Essentially, if this moves, the Xguard will go into a fail-safe mode. And it will also detect if it's ever rotated, or if it gets damaged or anything like that happens and it gets knocked over. If this is no longer in that position, the Xguard will know. Now that the lasers are all lined up and the reference point has been located, we can now deactivate the Class 3 lasers now. That is done by pressing the unlock button first, and then pressing the magic wand symbol again twice. And then you can press the lock symbol again. It goes back to the default screen as we had before. Now that we know that this is a left hand Xguard, we now need to tell it it's using a left hand and it is using a reference point. This is done by pressing the unlock symbol once, and then pressing the symbol that looks like a square and it's got 2 arrows either side of it. The light will start to blink faster, so it's ready for a command. And since this is left hand, we're going to be pressing the number 1 as in the manual. You'll see that the lasers will come back on again by themselves. This is where the system is now basically finding its reference point and cataloging that information into itself. This is where you now press the unlock button again and press the C button to create the width. If you press the 00 button, it will use a reference point. And the light will go back to being a slow flash. Press D button. That will give you the depth of the field, which can be set to what is required. For this example, I'm going to set it to 1 meter, which is done by pressing the number 1 and the number 0. I'm going to press the lock button again. That means it has a width of C, which is the reference point, so it's only looking up to that reference point, and it's only looking at the depth of 1 meter out from the Xguard. teach it, you press the unlock button again. You press the magic wand symbol once. The light will start rapidly flashing. Then you press number 1. You will then have a slow flash of 3 seconds to move out of the way of the field. The system will then calibrate 30 seconds to look for anything that it has inside its field. So at that point, please do not walk into the field area where it's looking at. Once it finishes calibration, it will return back to the 2 green lights and the blue light if everything is suitable within itself. Now that the calibration is complete, you should see 2 green lights and a blue light. You now need to make sure to test the field. What you should see is that the second red light should be red the entire time we are inside the field. If we step towards the camera and out of the reference point, the green light will come back on again. If we step towards the area, the red light will come back, so it knows that it's inside its safety field. If I step to the side, out of that depth of 1 meter we set, the green light will come back on again. Like that. The system will go back into operation. Red light comes back on when I'm inside the field. You also need to make sure you do this check from various different directions to make sure that your safety light comes on when you want it to. By default, the Xguard horizontal laser comes with pedestrian filter switched off. So the pedestrian walking towards it will trigger it. The reason why it is shipped as default like that is for the purpose of ease of an engineer. If you're on site, you can perform your approach tests by yourself first to check your approach angles correctly rather than having to go and grab a car to do it. At this point, you're able to check with the LEDs when you are inside the activation field and when you are inside the safety field. Since the second red light is now on, this barrier will stay up the entire time I'm inside this field. If I step out of this field, carry on my travel, both green lights will come back on and the barrier will drop back down. Now, the system comes by default set to be directional, so it only sees movement in the direction coming towards the Xguard itself. So if I'm now walking this direction, the Xguard will completely ignore me. And it will only function when I'm approaching it. And this is where I obviously check the approach angles on it and check my range is set correctly. We set it to 3 meters. If I want it to be shorter, so the car has to be, for example, here at the front before it triggers it, I can set it to do so. I can also set it to be 10 meters further back. If we've completed our safety field and opening field checks to make sure they are where they are supposed to be, we can now carry on and now enable the pedestrian filter. So that will stop pedestrians triggering the barrier. That is, I'm pressing the unlock button, and then pressing the volume symbol, and you then have a varied values. One is the pedestrian filter is off, so pedestrians will trigger, and then it goes up in stages. I'll be putting it to the typical 3, which is an object over 75 centimeters. And then pressing the lock button again. All this is done, it means that a pedestrian no longer activates the Xguard. So I can now approach it, and the Xguard will do nothing. It will essentially just ignore any movement in this direction, unlike before, where as soon as I move towards it, like this, it was going to give it a trigger. Now the safety field, that is still active. The safety field, you can't adjust the size of what it looks for inside the safety field. You can only adjust what it looks for in the opening field. It's essentially you're trying to filter out pedestrians, animals going through it or towards the laser. Only going to be a car or a bicycle if it's side on enough. You might need to play around with these values until you get the correct position for it. By default, start with a simple of just volume key and trying to use just number 2. That should essentially remove all false triggers. But if there is a large, if there's a potential for people to be walking inside the opening field, a large number of people, the Xguard could misrepresent this as a vehicle, so you may need to increase that value up. Now that we've set the safety field and the opening field, and we've adjusted the pedestrian filter to suit that particular site, there are further settings which are available. Inside the manual for the Xguard, there is a troubleshooting guide. It is useful to use that guide to identify what potential problems might be, and also provides helpful solutions.